Well, you're being asked to trust a God as they see fit in presenting him that is a monster. I mean, and very scary dude. You're told he's loving, but, he's going to throw you in hell if you accidentally believe the wrong thing. And he's burning all these people for all eternity. And he's an angry, wrathful, vengeful God. And he doesn't really care about your happiness, even though he loves you.
It's PMS all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Welcome back. We are on today with my guest, Tiffani Cappello, on the Tool for This Shit podcast. I'm Angie S., the founder of angies.com. That's angie-s.com. Link in the show notes. Well, I'm a health coach helping busy women fed up of trendy wellness bullshit look and feel younger effortlessly without the needles, aka the Botox and all that stuff. Ugh. So, to work with me, you can get in touch via the website or email me directly at hello@angie-s.com. Before I introduce my guest, I want to say a big thank you for the latest 2 reviews that came in from the US. One was from Jamie K34 and the other one is from Olia66. Now, I don't know your names from your usernames, so apologies for just using your Apple Podcast handle, but I just want to give you a huge thank you to you both. I'm really, really chuffed, so very exciting. They were really nice reviews. So if you haven't yet, please share this podcast with your friends. Rate, review, subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts or follow it on Spotify. For all the other platforms, whichever way you show love is how you can support this show. The more you do that, the more it helps new listeners discover this show. It takes 2 seconds and it's completely free for you to do. And it just really helps support me doing, releasing free content week after week. So I'd really, really appreciate it if you do that. Do you want to press pause and do it now? Or is that me just being a bit too pushy and controlling? No? I think it's cute. Come on, do it. Do it now. Okay, I'll back off. So today's guest, Tiffani Cappello, is such a wonderful, intelligent woman who actually also has a sense of humor. And she is today sharing her insights and story on how she escaped a Christian fundamentalist cult. So just a warning, this can be a triggering episode because although we do not cover those triggering topics in details, we do mention incest and various abuse, which unfortunately spins out from those types of cults. We still have giggles. It's still a very frank and open conversation. So the style is still there. You still get what you get every week. So without further ado, let's begin. Hi, Tiffani.
Hello, Angie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm so excited for today.
Me too. I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day here in Ohio, in the U.S., and the sun is out, and we've had rain for my garden, and I'm just really excited about today.
Okay, well, that's good. So first of all, thank you so much for joining me today. And this is, I'm actually, first of all, before I got to say thank you so much for joining me today. Today is going to be one of those interviews where I don't have these quite a lot, where we're literally going into quite a hard topic about someone who's experienced something that you've experienced. And I'm just really, really excited to get back into something like this. So I'm really happy you come on. And, what we're going to do today, obviously, we're going to talk about your experience of escaping a cult. And when we spoke, the reason why I asked you to do this with me is because I really valued your honesty and your insights on, not just about being in the cult and the dynamic, which is definitely what I really want to dig into, but you also had this insight on human psychology and behavior. And I'm just really excited to get into this. And I have tons of questions for you. So before we dive into this, please, Tiffani, introduce yourself, where you live and what you do.
Okay, so my name is Tiffani Cappello, and I am a women's empowerment coach and a rapid transformational therapist. So sort of fueled by my own human experiences, being a disempowered and oppressed woman within a patriarchal type fundamentalist religious cult, I now help other women to rise above oppressive situations, whether that's in a cult or in a bad relationship. I also run a support group called Former Fundamentalists on YouTube, or not YouTube, Facebook. And we have about, I'd say, 650 members now, people who are thinking about leaving their current oppressive religious situation or have already left and just need support and friendship while they just move through that journey.
How many people did you say were in the Facebook group?
I believe we have close to 700 people right now. Wow. And I also have another Facebook group called Transformed Women. And that is just for women just looking to empower themselves, to build confidence and courage. Some of the members of my other group are also in there. Yes. And I just encourage and help those women. I write different articles on mindset, confidence, courage, and sometimes just a little bit of what I call badassery, which is something that women need nowadays. Just learning to stand up for themselves, to be assertive. This is something that women are encouraged not to be in a lot of religious groups today, and it's very damaging.
Yeah, no, anything has to do with empowerment and building each other's confidence. I'm all for it. So before we get started, because obviously we're going to focus on the cult aspect, and I do have loads of questions that are going to, also going to surround around, oppression and trust and relationships and all that kind of stuff with what you just mentioned, just because you drop a couple of bombs in there and I'm like, oh, gonna have to ask you about this. But before we get started, I want to set the tone a bit and, not the tone, but set the backdrop, which is around cults. So before we talk about your experience about you being, in a cult, and you've been in a couple of those, couple of different fundamentalist cults, religious fundamentalist cults, and for about, I think, a span of 15 years. So before we go into that, can you tell us what is a cult? Because I think we need to clear up some of the misconceptions. What is a cult?
Well, in the religious world, most people view a cult as other people who don't believe like me. But in the psychological world, that is not the appropriate definition of a cult. So a cult is basically a group that is going to be oppressive in some way, psychologically, emotionally, sometimes financially. Sometimes there's physical abuse and sexual abuse that goes on, which wasn't the case in my group, but happens often in many groups. One of the key factors to distinguish a religious cult is they have this idea that they present to their constituents that we are the right way, we possess the truth. And so they have a very large degree of exclusivity. So you're encouraged to fraternize within that group, and everyone outside that group is viewed as dangerous, worldly, followers of Satan and the devil. You're encouraged to develop relationships outside that group only to bring people into membership in that group. The leadership of the groups often have a large degree of control over the population. They will tell you how to school your children, how to discipline them. They will tell you, what you can watch on television, what books you can read.
Wow.
They will, in the particular group I was in, which was Independent Fundamental Baptist, the pastor would call you out in front of the whole church during a sermon without using your name. Everyone knew. Or specific behaviors in your life that he would like to publicly shame you for, so that you would fall in line with the established doctrines and way of living. And so those sorts of things are very commonplace.
Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, there's not all of what you said, but quite a lot of what you said definitely reflects society for the last many, many years anyway. Like, even, I mean, not to that level. I'm not comparing what you experience with, being outside of a cult. But like a lot of the idea of being shamed for your behavior, what you said, like there's no empathy, no conversation, there's no seduction, almost like in that area. Obviously, apart from when they probably recruit you, but it's, even some of what you were saying, it sounds like a little bit like, like those I don't know if they call them, what is it, multi-level marketing scheme, pyramid scheme, where they try to convert everybody else. Like,
that's very interesting that you say that, because having come out of a cult, I don't think I would erase that part of my past, because honestly, it's given me a perspective on the world that very few people possess. Mm-hmm. And I can see cultic elements in political groups in particular. Yes. As an excellent example. I am a far-right conservative, so therefore everyone on the far left is wrong. And if you're on the left, you're an idiot and you're stupid and don't hang out with these people. I mean, some people are so extreme in their political views that they become cultic and they can't even have a conversation or a friendship with someone who is not of the same political belief system. And it doesn't matter if you're, in the United States, we have the right and we have the left. And it doesn't matter which side you're on. If you go to what I call the lunatic fringe of any group, it's the extremists. You will find these cultic elements on the extreme end of political spectrums. You'll see it in multi-level marketing groups. You will see it in mainstream churches, a lot of cultic elements. Yeah. And also just in people who follow certain teachers and gurus that may not be considered religious. Sometimes there's a cultic type of adherence to...
I'd like to drop the name Tony Robbins in there. Anyone like in that kind of categories, because I don't know, there's something off about the whole thing. There's something that feels really off about wanting to have people to stand up. I don't know if you saw the documentary on Netflix, but I used to really like Tony Robbins, but then I saw this documentary about his long weekend or whatever it is, and he literally goes after the most sordid stories and try to get people to stand up on a chair, tell it in front of everyone, thinking that he's healed them. He has that very godlike, I'll put my hand on your head almost, and look at all this. And the thing is that when you're vulnerable, when you are in a position of vulnerability, all you want is to be heard, understood, and be part of a family. I think anyone who listens and who understands exactly what it feels like to be lonely and not feel wanted anywhere, someone like that comes along and it's so seductive. But the problem is the aftermath and what it means. And actually is that taste for, what's the word? It's almost sordid. I don't know if I pronounce it right. SORDID.
You did.
Yeah. And it's that, and with the MLM, it's funny because you mentioned the MLM, because the multi-level marketing, because it's always like, because I was led into one. I was always like trying to push them away, but then many years ago, I got led into one. I didn't think it was what it was, and then it turned out it was that. And it really is like they try to always justify everything. They justify all the action, all the things. Oh, the outside world doesn't understand. They're not as elevated as us, so they're not. It's all this justification all the time. There's no questioning of themselves.
Yeah. And then there's a blind adherence. That's, a very common. And we, if you think about it, we have this tendency as humans to want to be right and to want to expel all uncertainty from our lives.
Yeah.
And if I could just find the one true book, the one true path, the one business system or person to follow that's going to give me all the answers, I don't have to think, I don't have to worry. And it's all about, getting rid of fear. It's all motivated by the fear of uncertainty. I just want to be certain about everything. And we really, it's not a place that we can actually realistically come to. And I think cults pander to that. And as you said, they also pander to the loneliness and the lack of connection. And I think we're going to see perhaps more cults kind of rising up, maybe with a little bit different flavor than traditional Christian fundamentalism, just because we are becoming an increasingly disconnected society.
Yeah, we're disconnected. And I just want to point out, because I know you mentioned about, you gave an example of like, if you are on the far right, then the left is like, you know, being shamed and whatnot. And it goes both ways. It's like, it doesn't even matter, like, if someone is like on the far left, far right, far up or far down, I don't know, they can make up all of these different parties, and I don't even care. If anyone's on the far end, I find both of them, they're bullies. And I find this, like, this is what puts me off, is like even if some of the messaging, I'm like, I stand behind, I can't stand behind the way they're coming across. I can't stand behind the whole and trying to shame people. That is not how you're going to win people over. I don't even understand what but anyway, that's I just wanted to do like a bracket, because I didn't want it to come across that only far right people were deluded, or far left, or the far left were evil, and I think everyone, both of those, the things they say about each other is just, you know, they act the same way. They're all bullies. I think.
Well, and all you need to do is look at election season in any country, and you will see that it's often the issues are glossed over, and we're behaving like bullies. Let's talk about everybody's personal life. Let's talk about the sexual experiences they had as teenagers. Let's talk about the time they smoked a joint when they were 14. I mean,
no, I know, it's like, oh, sue me. Yeah.
And then we go and tell our children not to bully. And yet you see adults constantly bullying one another on the internet, and it really, really bothers me, you know. And I'm sure I've been guilty of it myself, because it's human nature. But where you really see it expressed is in the lunatic fringe. And one of my sayings and mantras nowadays is the truth usually lies somewhere in the middle. Yes. Whether it comes to spirituality, whether it comes to, you know, your political positions. You know, I have very strong political opinions in given areas now. And I tend to look at people who don't agree with me. You know, sometimes I'm tempted to say, what an idiot, you know, and it does seem idiotic sometimes. But if you don't come from that perspective, and you talk with them or actually communicate them with the intent to actually listen and not to prove your point, you actually learn something about why they believe the way they do. And you can maybe even find a workable solution.
Exactly.
That's somewhere in the middle.
And, you know, if anything, it's just to get more understanding, because, I mean, for myself, I've always been a foreigner. I'm half Algerian, half Danish. I grew up in a different country than my bloodline. I've always been foreign. You know, I've had to have hard conversations with people. You know, I've been told to go home from employers, by the way, when I first came here. It's just things like that. But it's not, the thing is, what I always respected, and I still do, is when someone isn't pretending to be someone they're not. So if someone tells me, you know, they for example, they say they voted Brexit and they want, or whatever, you know, and everyone voted for different reasons. But if they say, sometimes it's been said in front of me, you know, oh, you know, we have too many foreigners here, and I'm like, you know, I'm not from here, right? And then we have a conversation, because I want to know, because I know they feel justified in their opinion. I may not like to hear it, but I'm not supposed to be liking everybody. And I always say, so why do you feel this way? Why do you say this? And then it gives me an opportunity to say to them as well, it's like, you do know that we have English people in Belgium, in France, in Spain. You know, some of them are on benefits out there. Some of them, they're not all like the glory of the UK abroad, you know. It's like, so it's like, it gives us an opportunity to have a conversation. And the thing is, I don't like them less. I have more respect, because at least they were willing to have the conversation with me. And I haven't changed their mind. They haven't changed my mind, but at least with the conversation, we can be decent. If I went straight away to go, you're an asshole, you're disgusting, you are, phobic of foreigners. I forgot the word now. Xenophobic. That's all it does is fuel their argument. And that's what people don't understand. They're fueling each other. They're fueling the opposition all the time. All the time. They're not making their case better. I don't know why I'm really wound up today. Sorry.
No, I love it. We should be wound up about things, you know?
Yeah. Don't fuel the opposition. So do you know what I was thinking? I was like, some political parties need to probably learn a thing or two about how cults recruit. So let's go back into because I think they seduce people in. ISIS hate the motherfuckers, but I tell you what, they probably seduce people in. they probably didn't try and bully that.
Oh yeah, it's really interesting that you brought up that group because they wrote an article, and if you haven't read it,
is it ISIS?
Yes, they produced an article in a magazine. I don't remember the name, but it's called "Why We Hate You."
Yeah.
And it's interesting because each political party in every country has an idea of why ISIS is in operation. You know, it's because Americans have gone on and done some wicked things on their soil. It's
yes.
This, it's that. So in response to that, they wrote an article and they basically said, "We hate you because you disobey Allah."
Yeah.
And we're going to hate you as long as you live sinful, reprobate lives. It's so fascinating because the ideas and opinions of why they exist did not correlate at all with what the public opinion is in different political arenas. And if you look at it, they have an idea. And they have a belief that the Quran is the inerrant, infallible word of Allah. And it's the same in Christian fundamentalist circles. The Bible is the inerrant and infallible word of God. And whenever you have a group of people who believe that a book, you know, whether it's the Bible or the Quran, is absolutely infallible, to be taken literally as divine, instantly inspired word of God, then you have a situation where that group can literally take any verse out of that book and say, I need to literally obey this. So, so in essence, there's similarities, and I had heard someone say at one time that if Jesus said anywhere in the New Testament that Christians should lop the heads off of people of opposing religious groups, we would see a lot of that. And I believe we would. So because ultimately beliefs have consequences.
Do you think sorry, go on.
Oh, that's all right. Beliefs have consequences. And when we hold a belief and we do not apply reason or logic to that belief, this is when we run into trouble. So I always tell people that faith without reason is one of the most dangerous forces on the planet. But this is what fueled the Crusades. This is what fueled the Inquisition, the Salem witch trials. And this is what is encouraged within cultic groups. You need to have faith in our teachings. They always want you to have faith in God, but it's in the way we present God to you.
Yeah.
You need to have faith in that. And you do not consider any other opinion other than what we tell you, because we're telling you the true path. And what happens is they make sure to scare you out of considering other viewpoints. In the independent fundamental Baptists, for example, especially for women, education is really frowned on. Well, women should never go to college. If you were reading intellectual type books, that was frowned upon. You need to read books within our religious circle. You wouldn't send your kid most likely to a public school. They would go to an independent fundamental Baptist school, where they will be thoroughly indoctrinated, or they will be homeschooled, again, thoroughly indoctrinated. I'm not downing all homeschool or private schools here. I'm just in this particular religion. But, and then you're told that the devil, Satan, is seeking whom he may devour, and he's looking for opportunities to trip you up. And one of the best ways he's going to trip you up is for you to use a reason and logic to consider any other viewpoint other than the one that we are providing for you.
So that's one way to muzzle people, right? Because if you cannot question without actually thinking that the devil is working through you, or that you think that your congregation is going to think that the devil is working through you, that's going to keep many people's mouth shut.
Oh, yes.
Right? Yeah.
And if you opened it to question, which unfortunately, well, maybe fortunately for me, I'm just a relatively intelligent individual who wasn't able to squash the application of reason and logic. So things would be preached. And for example, the sermon I heard one Sunday, people who smoke have demonstrated the fact that they are not Christians. They will burn for all eternity in hell.
Oh, gosh. Well, then I'm going on the Fast Express because I used to smoke like a trooper. I've got the Midnight Express to go on. Yeah. Listen, I hope there's a good party down in hell, because I know a few people coming with me. So
yes. And it was so funny because the reasoning behind what the preacher said was because your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and you are damaging your body with smoking. You have no respect for this temple of the Holy Spirit. So I thought, well, what about, eating bad food? So I walked up to the pastor, who was probably, 75 pounds overweight and looked 9 months pregnant. And I knew what his diet was. It was like a solid, steady diet of fried food. And I said, so if the individual who smokes is proving and demonstrating that he's not really a Christian individual by smoking, and I said, so what happens when we eat fried food? Isn't that damaging to our body? His face turned literally crimson with anger. I mean,
how dare you?
Yeah, especially as a woman, and I think there was that part of me that was like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? There was that part of me. And then there was, the part of me that was like honestly wanting to know, how is this okay and this isn't okay?
Yeah.
And if you get into these groups, you have one or two choices. You're going to be constantly presented with illogical things. They're going to tell you with fallacies. And so you're going to be in a state of
Can you come closer to the mic because you sound far away all of a sudden? I think you've moved backward. Yeah.
Sure, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So you're constantly presented with these so-called truths. You look around you and you see that evidence that presents itself in life. Like, for example, you're presented truths on how to have a good marriage, how to be a good parent, truths on how to conduct yourself prior to marriage, don't have sex before marriage, all of these things. And when you're looking at the reality of the congregants of this church and seeing that they're all depressed and anxious and miserable, their marriages are unhappy. And so you see these things very clearly, and you are told that this is the only right way. So if you're given the truth and your marriage isn't working, for example, then you're doing something wrong. If you're told to trust God and you don't trust him, then it's your fault. And yet, to give you the example of, people struggling with any sort of emotional or mental illness within one of these congregations, they're in the most unfortunate position because they're given these so-called biblical principles and they're told, if you adhere to these principles, you will experience love and joy and peace. And when they don't experience that, because what they're being taught is actually the polar opposite of what an emotionally and psychologically healthy person should be believing, they're taught the opposite. And then when they experience anxiety, they experience depression and hopelessness, then the finger is pointed back on them and they're being told that they're sinful and disobedient.
Yeah, let's rewind a little bit because I think I feel like we've jumped a few hoops, and because this doesn't make sense unless we have the structure. I think what you said, because I know what you're saying, but I think I'm not connecting completely because I think we need to go back a little bit. Just explain us like about the cult that you were in, the IFB, and so one, like what cult you were in and how they recruited you. So we have an idea of how this all starts.
Okay, so I was in the Independent Fundamental Baptist. That was the last place that I found myself. Prior to that, I was in more mainstream churches. I would say that most of the mainstream churches that I sort of went through on my journey had cultic elements, and I just gravitated towards increasingly oppressive, strict religious groups. But you will find cultic elements in a lot of mainstream denominations.
But yours was slightly different, the Independent Fundamentalist Church, right? So
yeah, it's pretty much standard outside of the Baptist world. The IFB is starting to be considered by most people to be a cult, as it should be. It's very, very damaging. There's a lot of abuse of women, of children, a lot of pathologically sexual behaviors going on, incestuous and so forth. And so it's starting to get the recognition that it deserves as a cult. And so I think their numbers are beginning to dwindle, and this makes me incredibly happy.
Of
If you go to
course.
a typical IFB church, you're not going to find very many IFB mega churches.
Yeah.
People are starting to wise up, and people have the internet now, so they can freely look stuff up and see what they're getting into.
So how did they approach you? How did you get into it?
I was at a pretty dark time in my life at that time, just really struggling. I had spent 5 years with chronic fatigue syndrome, which anyone who's familiar, and in the UK they call it ME. So I had that illness for 5 years. Coming with that illness is a lot of depression and anxiety. And I had recovered to a great extent at that time, but I was still struggling significantly with anxieties. So I think I was actually looking for a new church at the time, and I just called this church that I drove by, which was an independent fundamental Baptist church, and I requested to speak to the pastor there. And when I spoke to him, the thing that he really emphasized in our conversation was the fact that he had the truth. I mean, he could see me as an individual desperately seeking the truth. And I was very honest with him about where I was at. And, and he just kept saying, what you need is the truth. What you need is the truth. And I thought, oh, God, that sounds so lovely, And I asked my husband, because in our little world of patriarchal Christianity, he made the ultimate decisions. Could we try this church? And eventually he agreed. And we went, and we were smitten immediately. I mean, they just envelop you with these warm and loving arms. They call it love bombing. I mean, you're just the center of the universe, and everyone is so excited, and because they have the truth. And now we have an opportunity to find this truth, to experience it. And my husband at the time was a little apprehensive. How could they be the only right church? I mean, he was really because he picked up on that right away. And I said, well, let's just give it a chance. And we did. And you just get, the leaders are usually very charismatic. And this individual, he was a brilliant man, very articulate. And he would stand and scream in front of the church, all red-faced, like the typical fundamentalist Baptist preacher, all angry. But, as far as his intellect goes, he was not lacking when it came to how to craft the English language. I mean, he could have been, actually, he did become later a used car salesman. So
there you go.
It was perfect for him.
Yeah.
And there was, people did wander into our midst and wander back out without being sucked in, but many of us on the inside, and not all of us by any means, were people who really wanted the truth. We wanted to be free from having to think. We wanted to know with certainty that we had found the way. Because the big threat that hangs over people in Christendom is, I don't want to go to hell. And if I don't want to go to hell, I have to have the truth. And I have to make damn well sure I get it. Because if you go in one group, they're pointing the finger at everyone else and saying they don't have the truth, they're going to hell. If you go on the other side, they're pointing the finger at the place that you just were. So I was pretty fearful of making sure that I had that truth. And I had many children. And it was constantly emphasized, not just within the cult, but in other Christian groups, that train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart. And that's a verse. So the parental responsibility to keep your child from becoming a lost sinner who burns for all eternity in hell is an incredible amount of pressure. And as women, that responsibility was primarily placed upon us.
So I have a question, because this is really interesting. With what you just said, do you think, because I know when we spoke, you mentioned, actually you also said it earlier in this interview, is that this independent fundamentalist Baptist church, they were quite oppressive on women. It was very patriarchal. And I was just wondering, because I'd been thinking, okay, so what was the attraction for you as a woman? But now that you've said that with the children, I'm wondering, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't know if it's the same, I don't know what it would be like if you didn't have children, but so I'm assuming you have children. Did I understand correctly with what you just said?
Oh yes, I have had 10 pregnancies and 7 children. That's what we do in
You have 7 children? Oh my. Okay. Wow. Yes. Okay. Wow. Well, respect to you, because wow, I don't have any and I can barely keep a track of whatever I'm doing. So I'm impressed. Okay. So I was just wondering, so you have children. So I was wondering so I guess to go back, I was wondering what the lure is for a woman to go in a place that is so man-led, and actually that women are being told that, don't read, books, and don't go to education and all of this stuff, basically going back 100 years, was the lure that impending fear of doom on your children, that you would be responsible for sending your child to hell? Do you think that had some kind of leverage on you to go, I need this because I cannot be responsible for my child to burn for eternity? Is that guilt trip? Was that the lure to go into that?
Yeah, I don't think at the time that was, in the forefront of my mind. Honestly, when I look back, I really, believed the universe was governed by God, and my view of him was not very pleasant. So it was like trying to appease the angry deity. And it depends on what church you go to, whether you have a view of God that is more healthy and loving and supportive, and God cares about me and wants me to be happy. The more conservative, the more fundamentalist you go, it's more of the, God is basically a jerk in the sky, and he wants you to be holy and follow his laws and rules. And if you don't obey, you're screwed, So for me, I had a really strong desire to be a good person and a right person. So, and I did adopt
So is it the fear of God that made you go, okay, I don't care that they want me to read a book? Like, what I'm trying to find out, was God more scary than that cult, is what you're saying, or?
Initially he wasn't so scary to me as growing up. But the more I was exposed to those sorts of teachings, the scarier he became. But I just wanted to live right. And I wanted to do everything right as a wife and as a mother. And so I thought to myself, well, if you want to do everything right, then why not ask God, because he created you? So, and of course, he wrote this book. So having the belief that there was nothing, fallible about that book, that was completely without error, and then picking up that book and reading it.
So when you say the book, you mean the Bible, or yes. And I guess you're thinking, like, is it King James Version you guys were reading?
Oh, yes. King James is probably in every fundamental Baptist church the only acceptable version of the Bible.
Yeah.
And and so, at that, initially when I started to gravitate into more and more.
Sorry, I'm interrupt. Sorry, I have to interrupt. Sorry. I can't help. I have to pull out that thread. So, because obviously, the King James Version, which I think that version was done in the 17th century, like in 16 something, which means that's a long time between the original, if we believe in it, the original version was actually written, I think it was in Hebrew, and also it's like a type of ancient Greek, something like that. I was just wondering, did they ever mention the fact, because obviously they must not have liked that it was originally written in Hebrew, so I am guessing written by Jewish people. I'm going to come across super ignorant here, but I was just wondering if that's anything, because obviously every religion, as we talked about earlier, always point the finger, right? So is that something that the preacher with that red face that gets angry every time you ask a question, was this something he ever addressed, or was this like swoop under the carpet?
Oh no, we attended an entire 8-week course on the King James Bible and why it was the only true word of God, and how God had miraculously preserved these original books written by different men throughout all of history. And then, of course, King James picked up God's divine inspiration and perfected this version of the Bible. Not that it was already perfect. He just translated it really well.
Yeah.
So they would call other versions of the Bible perversions. The New International Perversion. That everything was referred to in those terms.
Yeah. So I've got a question around this, because obviously in my mind, cults, I always imagine there's like a money exchange, but not like when people give a donation at like Sunday mass, but there's this idea, a bit like, like with Scientology, for example, like it costs quite a lot of money to go up a few levels, from what I can hear from people who escape when I've watched stuff on YouTube. So I don't have a personal experience on it. I'm just like going allegedly. But was this cult, was there like you had to put like a part of your salary into the church? Was there some sort of like a tax?
Well, in independent fundamental Baptist churches, you're encouraged to tithe 10% of your income.
That's like in Islam, actually.
Yes, it is. And it's in the Old Testament. And the more, if you go to other churches nowadays, they ask for donation. If you did not tithe, you were going to hear a lot of sermons on tithing. And everybody would know it was you, because somehow the pastor would make it clear that you're the one not doing it. Now, my ex-husband always did tithe. And at the end of our experiences within these groups, I actually sat down and totaled that up. And we had given over $200,000 since we got married. Over the course of tithing in these various churches, which, that would have provided us with a fairly decent home.
Yeah.
Not that he didn't provide. I mean, he did. And he was an engineer, so he made a decent income. So you could see, why that number tallied so high. But, when you think about it, it was quite a lot of money. And when one of the reasons I fell in such disfavor in the church was because I refused to sign a document. So that's how I ended up leaving. There was a document where they were going to break free from a church that was financially assisting and supporting the IFB church where I went. And at this point, I was questioning everything. I refused to sign it. And so I walked into church. As last time I ever set foot, I walked in and he literally glared at me from the time I walked in. And the sermon that day was Jezebel, the Wicked Woman.
Oh. Yeah,
about 30 minutes into the sermon, his wife, who always sat in the front row, and her daughter just slowly turned around and stared right at me.
So what was it that you had done wrong in their eyes? Because you didn't want to sign the paper to separate a church? I don't understand.
Well, basically we had to sign a paper that said, I am in agreement with all the doctrines and teachings of this church and with the fact that I support this church moving forward to become its own independent entity, breaking free from the church that originally established it. So it was sort of like a missionary endeavor. This other church was partially financially supporting it, and he wanted to be on his own, the pastor. So, and I wouldn't sign it. I said no, because that's essentially being dishonest. I do not agree with everything that this church stands for and teaches.
Yeah.
And that you just, especially as a woman, you don't do. And interestingly, that final fundamental Baptist church that I was involved in, the pastor's wife was a very strong woman. And I don't think that he would have ever gotten very far at putting a heavy hand on her in any way. She's a very strong woman. So there was less misogyny and patriarchal emphasis in that church than in places I had been previously, particularly Charity Gospel Ministries, which was a place I did a short foray. Within the homeschool movement, there is quite a few what I call homeschooling cults. And they're just groups of like-minded women. They gather together a lot on the internet even. And they would put forth these very dangerous ideas.
Can you give me an example?
Well, I think the most dangerous of all, I just did an interview for a documentary about the stay-at-home daughters movement. Okay. So the probably the worst of it came out of a group called Vision Forum. And Vision Forum was an extreme patriarchal group, and they taught that your daughter is your property, and she is to remain under your authority, serving you until the day she marries, and you hand that property and that authority over to the husband. And this is the way God says it should be, and that's the way it was in Old Testament,
Oh, but that's what marriage is even today. When you go to a wedding, the father gives you away. It's like, what gives you away for what? When they say she's your property, do they actually say to the father's property, or the mother's property, or the both parents?
No, the mother and her daughters all belonged to the father. Everyone was his property.
Okay.
So I don't know if they would have used that word liberally, but that's exactly what was going on. And so young women were not encouraged to be very well educated. So an 8th grade education was good enough. It depends on what branch of these sorts of groups you kind of fell into. There were some groups very similar to like the Charity Gospel or the Mennonites, and an 8th grade education was sufficient for a girl.
Can you say 8th grade? How old are you when you're in 8th grade?
Oh,
in the US?
Yeah, 14, maybe not even, probably 13. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And so, so basically, girls were really encouraged to learn much of anything other than, what a girl needed to be successful. There was only one path to success was to be a good wife and mother. And so women were reared to cook, clean, take care of a household, have, Vision Forming encouraged very large families. So it was very common in the homeschooling circles that I was in for people to have 10, 11 children.
This is really interesting because, one is, which we're going to go into in a little bit, about how, on the day you left and what it's like to come on the outside, really, into that world which you were told to believe that everyone was led by the devil because they weren't part of your same congregation or cult or however way we want to call it, right? So, but the second part is that this is making it very difficult for women to leave because, you have no education, you have this really tiny world that a lot of them were born into. This makes it very difficult. And the third thing I was thinking was that it's interesting that they have such puritanical views about sex. However, they want you to have 10 kids. And we all know how they get there. I think, I don't know if I'm going to sound, it's going to sound weird for me to say, but I mean, conception is a miracle because there's just based on science, the likelihood of probability of someone getting pregnant, is tiny. The probability is just insane, so it is in one way or another is a miracle or however you want to call it. It's either a miracle or just highly unlikely. It's just like, it's a bit one of those things, right? So it is not something that I personally take lightly. I think, pregnancy is a beautiful thing and people having children is a beautiful thing. But let's not go overboard, in the sense of like, we all know how it got there, it's via sex. So it's so interesting that they are so controlling over women and not wanting them to be free. And I don't know what they told you about sex, if they thought that you're not supposed to enjoy it. I'm making a lot of assumptions here. I'm making it sound like as if they're encouraging you to have a lot of sex or babies, but I'm almost assuming they tell you not to enjoy it. I almost can't imagine they would encourage you to enjoy sex. Like, what did they say?
I think sex, it was okay within the confines of marriage, excluding certain sexual practices that, a lot of people participate in. But
what do you mean? So they said sex within marriage is okay, but what was?
Yeah, no anal sex, probably no oral sex. I wouldn't say. Yeah, I know you're really missing out.
Oh my God! So it's basically just penetration, and good luck for the woman if she's not ready.
Yeah, the happy missionary, and it would really depend on what sort of group you'd fall into. It's probably not something that would be brought up in the
No.
The word sodomy would be used for
of course.
incest, and that was forbidden. And it wasn't talked about too much. If you got into some of the literature, that's when you would see it more spelled out. You shouldn't have to speak it from the pulpit.
I think it's interesting, no oral sex, but they want you to, pop all the babies. It's like, it's a little bit, it's a bit harsh, I mean, they probably don't talk about foreplay. They probably say do they say that's wrong?
I wouldn't say no. I think foreplay would be fine. But your job as a woman is to serve a man. That's your job. You're to serve him in every way. You're to make sure he has his dinner. You're to look nice. You're to stay thin. You're to pop his babies out and still look like a supermodel.
Stepford wives.
Yeah, you are to, in some groups, you need to know how to sew and bake and make this man happy, because as Vision Forum talked about, the whole name Vision Forum is that a man should have a vision, and it's a job of the women to support the man in that vision. Yeah. And that was pretty much the view in the fundamentalist world. And so, and I'll tell you, the ideas on sexuality are very damaging, because if per se a girl ends up having sex prior to marriage or ends up getting sexually abused, she's now impure. And, a good young man was expected to sort of stay away from her, because, every Christian man in that sort of group wanted a pure virgin. So you're now polluted and corrupted. And
what about the guys? Were they allowed to go and have sex before marriage?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. So it's both ways.
No. And what you saw, the interesting thing is what you saw very commonly is two young people, they begin dating. And, of course, they have natural desires. They want to have sex.
Yeah, of course.
So they get married after 2 or 3 months. And the last church I was in, yes, the pastor actually encouraged that you should, when you see someone you're interested in, the first thing you do if you're a young man is you seek God. You pray about it. Then God gives you the okay. And so then you go to the girl's father and you ask permission to court her, because we don't believe in dating. You never even hold her hand. You do not kiss her. You do not near her. You're like, there's a space between the two of you. And then, you don't hold hands before you are married. There's no physical contact whatsoever.
There's no kissing. There's no kissing before marriage.
Nope. There's not.
Do they actually abide it? Is that I mean,
it depends on the group that you're in. How well people adhere to that, and how much parental.
But can I just say, like, from someone who hasn't grown up in that kind of environment, and someone who's, I'm 41, I'm a woman dating, and do you know what? Sometimes I would not mind if men I date, if they wouldn't want to just check in with, if they did a little prayer or meditation before meeting me, because I think I'm not condoning what the church was saying. I'm kind of making a bit of light and joke of it, but I think there's also something that, instead of like mindlessly swiping left or right, that these young men maybe could not just a little bit just check in with themselves before they come up, to a woman or a man and start dating, because there's a lot of, a lot of behavior out there, and unconscious behavior and stupidity. And I think that's not the worst thing I'd heard. I wouldn't mind if someone had a little prayer before they took me out for dinner.
Well, interestingly, even a more dangerous idea than that was the idea that women and men should maintain emotional purity. Now, what that means is that it is wrong for you to have feelings for anyone of the opposite sex that you are not married to.
Wow.
So unless you have your father's permission. So I remember my daughter was maybe 12 or 13. We're in church, and she started to seem really depressed and fearful and worried, and finally confessed to me that she was interested in a young man at church, that she had a crush on him. Oh. And she was so ashamed of herself. And I thought to myself, I had a crush. I wasn't raised in a church like that. I had a crush on people. This is just, so they demonize normal behavior. Sexual desire is normal. Having a crush is normal. And so these people would be so distraught, if let's say you made it to the courtship stage, you're so distraught over the fact that want to grab your girlfriend's boobs,
Yeah.
And you're tossing and turning at night over the wickedness of your lust, and people would break up who had never even had sex just because, my God, I can't stop thinking about her boobs.
So people who actually really attracted to each other are breaking up because the attraction is evil. Oh my God.
There's too much lust, so it's not wholly pure. And you had people all the time who basically got married really fast. I mean, and it happens in other churches as well that wouldn't be considered cults, because they have an injunction against premarital sex. So people meet, and the girl won't give it up, and she's got a ring on her finger in 8 weeks.
Yeah, but also, they must be super frustrated. So I don't blame them getting married after 2 months.
Well, and you have no release because masturbation is an absolutely wretched, wicked sin. And this is why you have so much sexual abuse of men, especially older men in leadership with young women. You have so much incest going on among siblings because you're basically, training the brain that these lusts are evil. And so now you have sexual desire. Now you are combining and coupling shame and guilt with that. And anyone who understands psychology knows that the driving force deepening and perpetuating addictions is almost as frequently that guilt and shame. I drink, and then the guilt and shame drives me back to this behavior, and it becomes a destructive pattern. So within the IFB, there is a tremendous amount of sexual abuse that goes on, of pornographic addiction with the men who, are just not just looking at pornography. They are absolute addicts to pornography. They're the guys that are hitting up the 14-year-olds online asking if they could buy them pizza. I'm speaking from an actual case that happened within the church. And I've always asked myself, why is there so much sexual deviancy within this group? And if you look at the highly repressive groups, that's what you find.
I mean, can I ask you, because it makes sense, obviously anything you oppress is just going to come out, stronger. So obviously it's in my opinion, is super unhealthy to repress even thoughts of another person you have a crush on. I mean, having a crush is the nicest feeling. So anything like that, oppressing desires, thinking that you are a terrible person, you feel shame, guilt. I wonder where does that circle loops into justifying incest and pedophilia? Because obviously that is still sex and that is still evil. According to their beliefs, but how come they are not just meeting someone of their own age or a consenting person that isn't within the family? How come it's okay to go inwards in the family or abusing young children?
I think it's because there's a higher amount of risk involved with finding another adult woman to have sex with, first of all. Second of all, because...
What was the risk? Because she'll report you to the leader or
well, you might come around and tell your wife. An innocent child can be bullied and kept silent.
So those were married people. These are not people who were not having...
not always, but generally. And I think a big factor, too, is that prior to you ever enter, I think holds true whether you're in the church or not. I don't think most people are born pedophiles. No, I know no one's born a pedophile. If they're either sexually abused themselves, or they enter into that dark world because they're on the slippery slope of pornography addiction. So they're not just the guy looking at pornography once a week. They're the guy who is looking at pornography 3 and 4 times a day. The pornography is an addiction, so it's setting off certain neural circuits that are producing dopamine and other neurochemicals the same as if he drinks alcohol or shoots heroin. And it takes increasingly more and more and darker and more disturbing pornography to give him the same rush that he had.
Yes.
And then it ends up progressing downward to children. And, I've seen this, happen within the churches.
So basically, because, first I was understanding that maybe those were people who were not having sex because they were single, so they cannot have sex because they can only be married to have sex. So, but obviously because of that whole shame and guilt and this very controlled and contrived sexual mentality, even when they are married, there probably is a lot of conflicting feelings with having sex. And obviously if there's a lot of things that are banned from the table of what you can do, maybe. I mean, there's a lot, maybe, do you think are they, I'm trying to understand, like, are they seeking that rush or that an outlet that they can't find within the marriage because it's such a mind fuck, really, that they sort of like then go and search, whether it's like, watching porn all day and then eventually, going and, abusing people. Is it like because they've entered this slippery slope because it is unhealthy from the get-go, how they look at sex?
If you think about it from the perspective of a woman, you are told within fundamentalist type groups that, sex is an impure and wicked and lustful thing. And so we were asked to dress in very, very modest ways. Your collarbone should not be showing. There should be no outline of your breasts. Your clothing was loose. You should not wear pants. You need to wear a dress. Your dress needed to be long enough. Tank tops and shorts were never worn. This was the dress of a godly woman. So this is what you're told. Then when you get married, you're told that now it's okay for you to enjoy sex. But your mind has been conditioned to think of your own sexuality as something wicked, as something evil. And so now you're supposed to go into this marriage and suddenly be, a wild woman. And
sexually free.
Now, and isn't that what deep down inside, isn't that what men want? They want a woman who's excited, desires them, has, frequent orgasms. This is what men dream of. It's part of being a man in their mind. And
even that side of a cult, is difficult for most women. I mean, I'm not sexually liberated. I may be talking about sex on the podcast, but because I have my personal difficulties around it, I'm not like, most people grew up, a lot of people grew up in not a sex positive, particularly environment, not because it was intentional. It's just because that's how their parents, their grandparents were brought up. So it's kind of passed down. So yeah, I think I can imagine, I can't even imagine what it's like to be in a cult and then all of a sudden having to be sexually liberated and enjoy it when you've had so much shame around it before that. I mean, that's very difficult.
Yeah, I was married 23 years, and until I began to break out of that, I could not enjoy sex without guilt.
No.
If I started to enjoy it, I started to feel guilty. And I would express that to my husband, and he would be like, well, it's okay because we're married. And I would think, well, yeah, I know that, but why can't I break free from this mindset that, to let myself loose sexually was just evil in my mind. And you were so stifled. And my boyfriend now calls it no fundamentalism.
Yeah.
It's like no fundies and stuff like that, because it was almost as if happiness and fun and anything that you weren't under complete control of yourself, was foolishness.
But then I still don't understand how that leads to, and I say men, obviously women abuse children too. How it leads from them, those adults who are married, to go then and abuse children.
I think it's access. They've probably been sensitized by more extreme pornography, because if you study the human mind a little bit, when you have this driving force of guilt and shame, it does seem to deepen addictive processes. So now they're in, looking for darker and darker pornography, and there's a lot of shame and guilt. I mean, I don't think this is something a man within a church is ever going to justify in his mind. He's going to be very tormented by the fact that he now is attracted to his 6-year-old daughter. That's going to be,
God.
This is going to be absolutely tormenting to this individual. And they probably cry and pray and ask God to deliver them. But they keep going back to their addiction, just like, let's face it, heroin addicts, most of them don't want to be heroin addicts. They know that they might die. They know their life is falling apart. But the pull for that addiction is so strong. And I think that's what you see, within these groups. And because you are absolutely forbidden to go to psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health counselors to get help, because those people are satanic. All of the answers, my pastor used to say, to every single problem you have is in this Bible, and he would hold it up. And you were forbidden to go outside of the Word of God to find any answers. But, it was the teachings that they were presenting to you that was leading to your mental and emotional instability to begin with, because there are there's certain things you need to believe to be in a state of mental and emotional wellness. And they taught the exact opposite of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so if you were not emotionally unwell entering into an extreme fundamentalist group, you will be in a short amount of time.
Yeah, because that's the bit that we talked about last time, wasn't it? When you and I chatted about how you are made to just believe facts regardless of the reason. I actually just want to read this because I looked up, there's online, there was these 13 items that defined a cult. Now, obviously, people may agree, disagree, but one of them. So I just want to quickly go over the list, and then I want to talk about this mentality about just accepting things regardless of the fact presented to you. And obviously, some of the things you mentioned, one was what makes a cult, there's a charismatic leader who becomes an object of worship, a process of indoctrination or education as in use that can be seen as coercive persuasion or thought reform, like brainwashing, economic, sexual, or other expectation of group members by the leader and the ruling coterie. 1, 2, 3, 4, absolute authoritarianism. I can't say it.
You got it.
Yeah, without meaningful accountability. Yeah. The next one is no tolerance for questions or critical inquiry, which you brought up a few times. No meaningful financial disclosure regarding budget or expenses, such as independently audited financial statement. Unreasonable fear about the outside world, such as impending catastrophe, evil conspiracies, and persecutions. Now, with that, I know you mentioned the story about your child when we last spoke about how she was in the playground and a child came up to want to play with her, and she was petrified because he wasn't part of the group. And that's when that was one of the calling cards for you to go, something's not right. Another thing they say is there is no legitimate reason to leave. Former followers are always wrong in leaving, negative or even evil. By the way, that also happens in jobs as well, previous employees. Former members often relate to the same stories of abuse and reflect a similar pattern of grievance. There are records, books, news articles, broadcast reports that document the abuses of the group leader. Followers feel they can never be good enough, which is something that we spoke about. The group leader is always right. And the last one is the group leader is the exclusive means of knowing truth or receiving validation. No other process of discovery is really acceptable or credible. Now, I'm looking at the time. I don't know if you're still okay for time.
I'm fine.
You're fine. Okay, cool. Perfect. So there's a few things in there. So I wanted to touch on, one was no reasons to leave, unreasonable fear of the outside, and the not good enough. Because I think those things and maybe you want to bring up other things as well, but some of those things I think kind of are part of the foundation as to why people are just taking anything that is thrown at them by the leader as Godspell, and what everyone else is wrong, which is kind of part of the mindset that we're seeing a lot in the last few years, whether it's in politics, any kind of movements. I mean, even people like, even movements like PETA. I love animals, but I'm not going to put a human being's life at risk, or maybe not PETA does it, but some of the groups anyway. Like, there are things where it's either you're with us or against us. It's very much that, you're either with us or against that. I don't know if it was Bush Jr. that said that. And it's that kind of mentality is very off-putting for me. And I think some of it is used in, like a cult, like in cultish groups, because it keeps a handle on people. So can you tell me a little bit about the experience you had when you were being told to just believe whatever was taught, whatever the leader said, but you had your reason pop up, because you're clearly an intelligent woman, and I can tell many of the times you were questioning what was going on. So how does that feel, and how do you keep staying there? Like, what's the whole, what happens to you when you just have to believe things regardless of anything else? Proofs.
Well, when you begin to see things happening usually it begins with any individual leaving a cult where their life becomes so painful, staying becomes so painful. And that was the case with me. I had just a horrific case of chronic anxiety. And that is when I began to question, why am I such a mess? And you ask the church leaders, you don't trust God. Well, you're being asked to trust a God as they see fit in presenting him that is a monster. I mean, and very scary dude. You're told he's loving, but, he's going to throw you in hell if you accidentally believe the wrong thing. And he's burning all these people for all eternity. And he's an angry, wrathful, vengeful God. And he doesn't really care about your happiness, even though he loves you.
It's PMS all the time.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And, you can look it up. I wish I could quote it, but Richard Dawkins says, the God of the Old Testament is, and then he spews out all of this wonderful verbiage of adjectives that he uses to describe him. And that is how we saw God, exactly like Dawkins described.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the Old Testament is a horror movie. Basically, it's just insane.
If you're a woman or a slave,
not good times. Not good times to be alive.
You find yourself in this position where you just can't trust God, but you're being criticized continually for doing so, and it's a slippery slope into mental illness. And I've seen. One of the things that loomed in the back of my mind was that my best friend in high school, before I ever entered a cult, was actually in a cult herself at that time, and remained in various different cultic groups throughout her life. And one of those groups convinced her, when she was having particularly difficult marital troubles, that she was demon possessed. Convinced her so thoroughly that she began to manifest like weird symptoms of demon possession that she was reading in books, like demon possessed people act like this. And then she was so convinced. And I watched her slide down this slope into mental illness to the point now where she, as far as I know, lives in a full-time care facility now.
Yeah, because they convinced her she was possessed.
Yeah. And so I'm looking at this from an outsider perspective, and it's causing me to question my faith. And then my daughter ended up struggling emotionally and mentally. And I could see that it was as a direct result of the teachings. And then I began to think, why is everyone so miserable? The Bible said that in the New Testament, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness. And I'm looking at this going, this is not what I'm seeing. So, and then I had read another verse where Jesus said, you should know a tree its fruit, and a good tree does not bear bad fruit. And I'm thinking, well, the fruit hanging off of this tree is just rotten and it stinks, So I thought something is wrong, and I began to start thinking through what might be wrong. And I'm studying the Bible and trying to fit, my beliefs there. But the Bible's, not real clear on issues. That's why we have 30,000 different denominations in the world. And that's just within Christianity.
You have 30,000 different what, you said?
Christian denominations.
Yeah. Oh, is that many?
I believe so. I don't
Wow.
have a source for that, but I read that.
I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I didn't know when I was growing up in Belgium. All I knew was Christian, and within Christian there's Catholic and Protestant, and obviously there's Judaism and Islam. But I didn't realize that under the Christian faith, up until I came to the UK and then also went to the US, I didn't know there was so many denominations. You don't really have that. I mean, I didn't have that exposure growing up. It's insane. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and none of them agree on what this book says.
But they're all Christians,
And it depends. If you're independent fundamental Baptist, everyone else just thinks they're a Christian,
Yeah. No, of course, yeah. But from the outside, I'm like, but you're all Christians. And
I began to read books. I mean, that was how I began to read books. And as I would read these books, I would think, now, if I thought, I would feel better reading them, and thought, now, if I thought like this, I would be happier. If I thought that I was actually a decent person, not a wicked, horrible, evil sinner, and this horrible woman, and if I thought that I wasn't actually responsible for men lusting, and that they had personal responsibility for their own thought processes, just various things like that. So what initially happens is you end up in a state of cognitive dissonance where you're looking at reality and you're seeing it clearly. Okay. And then you're looking at what you're being taught, and it just doesn't mesh. And so you either have to grasp those beliefs blindly, or you have to break free, because cognitive dissonance is very painful and you can't stay in this state for very long. So I began to just research frantically, I would say, and anxiously, am I in a cult? And I actually stumbled upon those same 13 signs of being in a religious cult, and the criteria was met, hands down. And I'm like, oh my God. And I presented this to my husband, and he was even like, oh my God, He wasn't ready to leave, because he was a very loyal individual and very interconnected, and liked his relationships. And so, I was already on the outs. I was Jezebel, the wicked woman. So I'm out of there. So, but, it became increasingly more painful to stay. And I'm watching other people suffer. So, anyone who ever, you talked earlier about the signs of a cult being that you can't really leave and be on good terms. So one family there, the husband was working as a landscaper at a golf course, and he just wanted to be, he's working 16 hours sometimes in the summer, missing his kids growing up. He thought, I want to go back to college, get my degree, and teach business. Be in high school, maybe be a high school teacher. Oh my God, teaching in the public schools. So the minute word got out that this was his plan, and then they were going to, of course, move. The minute it got out, the sermons changed. It was, public school teachers are worse than drug dealers. That was.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Then another sermon was that you are literally married to the church that you are a member of. You are not allowed to leave without the pastor's permission. That was in the sermon. Yeah. So you're looking at this going, this family was ripped to shreds week after week. And the day they finally left, instead of in a loving, supportive church community where they would have thrown them a party and bought gifts and sent them off with love, they were ostracized. The pastor went in his office, shut the door. His wife did the same, and they left the church crying.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole family turning their back on them, really, because they were so close.
And I'm watching all this, and I'm a fairly compassionate individual, and thinking, oh my God, and it was frequent. I mean, if you did not do as the pastor wished, You would hear about it from the pulpit. And
it sounds like a 5-year-old child, that leader, and it sounds like very like a bullying environment. It's like everyone gangs up against you. It's pretty horrific.
And so many healthy behaviors were pathologized and made to be sinful. There was another family in the church, and the husband, the economy collapsed back in the 80s or whatever.
Yeah.
I remember it was. And he was working 2 jobs, and he was criticized for falling asleep in church, and the family was struggling so bad financially. So my daughter, being a good, godly young woman, developed a couponing habit. She figured out how to be a super couponer. She could get $400 to $600 worth of free food.
Wow.
Literally every month, using this super couponing strategy she developed, right? And she would give a good portion of that food to this family. And she was called into the church office and told this: that family is under the judgment of God for sin. And by feeding them, you are thwarting and curtailing the disciplinary actions that God is trying to bring on them. And my daughter just cried. She thought, I'm being such a lovely person, and I'm pleasing God, and I'm helping. And she was criticized for that.
You can't see me, but I've literally, my jaw just like touched the floor.
Yeah, I literally, this is when my rebellion, was starting to come. I go, well, we're giving them food anyway.
Yeah, good. I mean, that's so evil. It's so mean. It's really,
they weren't allowed to get public assistance because that was a sin. So, there was no other way to get food if you can't get public assistance, and no one in the church is going to help you because you're under the discipline of God. Was there a 3-year-old under the discipline of God? And this is the kind of thoughts that were going through my head at the time and helping me to see that something was very wrong. And what ended up happening was, when I made my final decision to leave, I decided, I was at a restaurant eating, and the waitress said, "Aren't you Tiffani? And you go to this church?" And she said, "Yeah, I went to one of his churches." And she spilled the beans, told me some dishonesty, that this man had done, even with financial issues. So I began to research. I became a private investigator.
So the waitress spilled some beans on the leader.
Yes, dishonest activities in the past. So I made phone calls, and I called and found out that I could verify these dishonest activities. I presented them to my husband at the time. People were starting to question what was going on in the church, and they came to me and asked me what I was finding. And I'm like, here it is. And, he had started several churches in several different places. And when the church wouldn't work out the way he wanted to, he'd pick up and leave the state and start one somewhere else. And I believe he's even started a church now, the last I've heard, somewhere. I don't know where, I think everyone that dissipated out of there, most of them have come to a healthier place, not all.
So it sounds like that church got dissolved and you left, or?
Yeah, well, once we withdrew, the church couldn't financially stay afloat. So the pastor was...
because you guys were the main donors.
Well, I don't know if we were, but there weren't that many, there wasn't a large church. So when you pull a family out, when you add people with large families and stuff in, it might seem like a larger congregation than it is. But when, it makes bills now unpayable. So he was really invested in us not leaving. And I just refused to go at that point. I'm just like, well, that's fine. I was beginning to question all of these different doctrines. Like, I had to obey my husband and everything. I'm like, I'm not going.
You say you're not going to church anymore?
No, I said I will not go there. And I don't know how long my husband went after I left, and which made me very nervous, because I knew the minute he walked in the door, they're trying to separate me and him and badmouth me to him and tell me to get his wife under control or whatever. This wasn't our first experience with that. I had left, I had refused to go to another church earlier on. And the pastor was trying to get my husband to go out to eat with him to talk about getting his wife under control. And I was a rebellious woman and I was in leadership position. I should not be within the home. And he was warned by a few other men that this same activity had occurred with the pastor, and they had left. And a couple of the men warned him, this is probably what's going to happen. He's going to call you. He's going to want to take you out to lunch. He's going to try to divide you and your wife. And so he was ready for it when it came because he had been warned.
Yeah.
So he knew what was coming, and then there's
when he says get your wife under control, what does that actually really mean? Like, what is he trying to get the husband to do?
Basically, the woman in fundamentalist Christianity, in a lot of mainstream Christianity, is to submit to a man. So submit means you submit in everything, and in some groups, it's even a legal activity. So if let's say your husband asked you, it's even in a book, I wish I could remember the title of it. I think it was Daughters of Sarah. I think that's the name of the book. It's probably not in print anymore. But in this book, you were told, you're given an illustration, a story of a woman whose husband asked her to get an abortion because he didn't want a baby. And she didn't, of course, want the abortion, but she agreed to do it anyway, and how God is the vindicator. You are to obey God. God is the vindicator. And somehow God miraculously intervened and she didn't end up getting the abortion. But, it was just it's a slavery. It's nothing more than slavery to another individual. And you have no rights. And I heard sermons that basically said, if you're a woman, you have no rights.
Oh, gosh, I don't even know how. Yeah.
And it's funny because I was destined not to survive within this environment because I wasn't raised that way. Neither was my ex-husband. We just gravitated towards it like a frog slowly boiling in water. But, I'm just, my personality is when it comes to injustice, I keep my mouth shut. I'm a very compassionate, empathetic person, but if I see someone being hurt or abused, I can't keep my mouth shut. So watching other people within the church be abused and then being subject to that sort of psychological abuse myself, there's just no way.
Yeah. No, but it's good you had that, fire in you, that lioness, right? Yeah. And I think that's what, I think a lot of us women, we being told, oh, she's a bitch because we have where a guy would be like the dude, for like having putting his foot down. And I think that part of us that gets fired up, angry, and again, I don't condone violence, and I'm not talking about violence like hitting people,
right.
But that part of us that gets so fired up in the face of injustice or anything like that, that part has been tried to be snuffed out, via education, religion, you name it. And I think it's taken me a long time to come to peace with it. And I think that part of me, there's lots of times where I haven't been able to express, like in relationships, sometimes to express what I want and need doesn't come naturally to me. But that part that safeguards me and that hates injustice, that one, she's very strong, that part of me. And I've come to embrace her because she's what has helped me survive and come out of very sticky situations many times. And that part, I will never let anyone snuff that out. I refuse to. And I'm glad that I think that part of you, that sword of this injustice that wouldn't be muzzled, that's something to be very grateful for. Because if you don't have that, I believe it can literally, if you can kill someone's soul, you may as well kill them almost, like it's a lethal thing to do to someone, to snuff out their fire.
And you will see a lot of half-dead women in these groups who are very depressed.
Yeah, it is depressing.
But they continue to rationalize the doctrines that oppress them because to question them is very, very scary. And if you're holding the fires of hell over someone's head, there's no way of allowing yourself to have rational and logical thought if it's going to put you in hell. So unless you can dismantle that fear, which I did early on. I had to dismantle that fear in order to be free to move forward and be able to think freely about whether or not what I believed was true or false.
But the invisible chains, right? Those are very powerful. I heard on another podcast, and then I want to hear about how it was for you when you left. But I heard this on another podcast this week about, elephants. Now, I haven't checked this, but so if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't know if it's true, but they say that, whoever is a elephant keeper, for example, they'll put the baby elephant, they'll put like a little, not even a rope. I don't know how you call this. Une ficelle, a little string, and you attach it to a tree. And it's a very tiny string, but the elephant gets to learn that he can't really, no, it's not a string at the beginning, it's stronger. Anyway, he's attached to a tree so that he can't just run around. The bigger the elephant grows, that chain can become a string, is what I meant to say, sorry. So it becomes a string. So basically you have like big grown elephants with just a tiny little string attached to this tree, and they will never break that string, even though they could just make that one extra step. And it's that because he still believes it is attached by this bigger chain to this tree.
Yes, that is true.
Probably misquoting it completely, but that is that thing, right? It's that mental chain.
That is true. I've heard that.
Okay,
in India, elephants, very large, have very small chains around their ankles, and they're just they will pound a peg into the ground, and easily that elephant could pull that peg up, but he doesn't know it because he's never done it. And so in essence, he has what they call in the psychological world learned helplessness.
It's so sad.
And so that is what these women live, these children, even in people within cults, live in a state of learned helplessness. And it's just, fortunately, I just have a large degree of tenacity, and I cannot, I couldn't continue on in my suffering. That was death to me.
Yes.
It was going to, and I'm saying that very literally because my health was so poor. I had eczema, I had food allergies, I had so many things wrong with me physically. And if stress is a very huge contributing factor to chronic illness.
Listen, stress is worse than junk food. I'm a health coach, and I say this all the time. Stress will do more damage to you than junk food, which is why with this whole COVID thing, I was like, people need to stop obsessing over the news because it's making you physically sick. And, any little sniffle, you're going to think that's it, you're dying, and you're not. It's just, I think stress is a very powerful deterrent to your health, both mental and physical.
Well, and interestingly enough, when I began my...
And I hate junk food, by the way. So when I say stress versus junk food, I'm saying a lot. Like, I don't condone junk food at all. But, like, that's what I mean. Like, it's that bad. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm not surprised you had all these elements.
I was eating organic. I was doing everything. I'm eating organic food. I have a farm. I grow this stuff myself on high mineralized soil. I only use, goat milk products if I use dairy. I mean, I was meticulous in every aspect of my diet. But your beliefs can poison you even worse than junk food, which I also don't eat, by the way. I don't eat sugar. I don't eat donuts or crap ever. But I will tell anybody the same thing that you tell them. Your beliefs have consequences, and we do good for ourselves to analyze whether those beliefs are toxic or empowering. Your beliefs are going to, there's a learned helplessness that we can all fall into. And that's why, why I do what I do today as a women's empowerment coach, because I love to set women free. And I work with men too. I mean, probably, honestly, 40 to 50% of my clients are men still that I work with. But, set them free from these beliefs that are keeping them from having a happy, fulfilled life.
I'm really happy you said that you work with men, because I believe that if we want to, set women free, we have to set men free as well, because a lot of the things that is driving a patriarchy there's a lot of things, and I don't know it all, and I haven't studied it. So, I'm maybe upsetting a lot of people by saying this, but I think if men did not feel the need to control a woman, or they were not scared of a woman's strength, or they were not any of those things, I don't think that we can free women by shaming men. I do not condone behaviors like what was his name? Weinstein and the Bill Cosby, right? Those two people deserve prison for, I hope they're rotting there. I hate them with passion. But those are the other end of the spectrum. But I think so those, bad behavior, I'm not down for this. But I think by shaming men, we are in a broad stroke, by brushing them all into one stroke, we are doing ourselves more harm than good.
Well, what we're doing is now, trying to put them in a position of disempowerment that women were once in. And what is
we're becoming the bullies? Exactly.
Yes, let's have equality. Let's have equality now. And
exactly.
That is what a healthy relationship looks like. It used to be psychological research focused on pathology and deviancy and studying people with mental disorders. Now, with the positive psychology movement, we're studying happy people and healthy people and people with good relationships. What is it that they're doing? What do they think? What do they believe? So now we have the ability to say, this is what a healthy relationship looks like. And it looks like equality. The minute someone steps into a position of dominance and authority over another person and begins to push that person down, then you end up in a situation where there's some toxicity, infiltrating that relationship. And I think it has a lot to do with beliefs. And, in some cultures, women are, like in some Indian cultures, so the Native American Indians in the United States, women held very honored positions within communities. In other cultures, women are property. In the fundamentalist world, whether it's Islam, whether it's Christianity, it matters not. They're very much, we were taught that all the sin came into the world because of Eve, a woman.
I know. Oh my God, that story.
Women are less intelligent. Women are not as moral. Well, I always counter argue with this. How many women are in prison for serial murder?
I don't actually know.
For rape? I'm sure there's some. I'm sure there's women serial killers. If you look at most of the violent crime is committed by men. If you look historically, women have been the civilizing factor in societies. Look at the.
They have been the what factor? Civilizing.
Civilizing.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So if you look at the history of the Old West in the United States, for example. So men would go out and start these gold mining towns, and initially they would leave without their women. They would go out. So the only women in the town were at the local whorehouse, and the homicide rate in some of these towns was like 40 or 50%. It was absolutely horrible. And then the women come, and instantly the homicide rate goes down to like 5%. It was amazing. And we do civilize, there's something about a female that civilizes a man.
Yeah, but it's probably like the amount of hormones as well, like testosterone is what, testosterone is part of what makes men think it's a good idea to send a dick pic, for example. I've never been the recipient of that unless, like a relationship where we're having fun, but I've never been, touch wood. I've never had that kind of surprise in my inbox. But I think that's the kind of thing. But I think the same in the way as well. I find that men as well, a good man calms me. It calms me down. I think we have a calming effect on each other as much as it's also an arousing effect if you are, heterosexual. But there's a calming effect. There's a balance that comes in when we have a mixture.
That balance is important. I think there is if you look at the what can tip the scales, and it's one person thinking they're more important or better than another person. And that's essentially what, you probably won't find in most cults where there's equity, and there's not equity in most Christian churches today at all. And we need that. We need that. And a lot of men today, and maybe this has been your experience, it's been mine, they're afraid of strong and powerful women. They do not like them. They feel emasculated by your very presence. I don't know why that is.
I have noticed that when I have day jobs, corporate jobs, I'm too, I speak up, I speak my mind. I'm not subservient. I can't pronounce my words today. Subservient enough, That's just not me. I can't be bowing down to anyone unless we're having a fun game or we're playing, or you know what I mean. I don't know. I can't do that, and I think they don't like it. I've noticed that they really don't like it. The men in those.
And if you look at the stronger, powerful corporate executive women in leadership, a lot of times have difficulty in the dating world because men are intimidated by them. And it's kind of sad,
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Not all men, but a good proportion. There's still, even in the secular world outside of cults and churches, there is a mindset of leadership among men. And just some of it is warranted. If someone breaks in this house right now, I'm probably going to let my boyfriend take care of it. The odds are in my favor that he is going to be able to do a better job thwarting.
Yeah, but there's a difference between equality. So I believe that we all equal across gender, across race, across everything. I think we're all human. So all humans are equal, but we are not the same. So I cannot, I believe that, so let's say if I have a partner. So let's say if I'm dating a man. The man and I, we're both equal. We both have the same rights, duties, whatnot. We are equal. But I am not the same as him. And that is why I like him. That's why I'm attracted to him. I like that he has more square shoulders, bigger chest or whatnot. And I like that he's muscle to muscle, stronger than me. It makes me feel more feminine. I like the fact, I can probably put a shelf up, but I quite enjoy that he does it. So we are equal, but we are not the same. And not being the same is not a bad thing. Being different is a great thing. And I think that's why people sometimes confuse, And I want to have a guy that if someone's in, touch wood, it doesn't happen. But if there's an intruder come in, I want him to handle it. I don't want him to hide behind me. And so, yes, I'm very old fashioned like that. But, we are equal. We both bring something to the table.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's the equality component that makes it so essential. When you have certain mindsets, whether it's in a relationship or in your own personal life, or how you view your career, how you view yourself, there is such a thing as beliefs that are going to destroy and ruin your life, and beliefs that are going to empower you and propel you forward to a successful, happy future. No matter what arena of life we're talking about. And so it behooves everyone to really seriously analyze, are my beliefs empowering me, or are they dragging me down? And that's the question I asked myself that led me to leave the cult. And it's a question I still ask myself. And it's a question I get my clients to ask themselves.
I love that. Absolutely. I love that. I'm very impressed by that you've got such an innate way of doing that. It's not easy to question our beliefs. And I'm looking at the time, and I do want to round up, and I do want to ask you, just quickly, if it's possible. I don't want to make it any injustice, but what was it like leaving the cult? Because obviously, as much as you wanted to leave, how was it to be out in the outside world?
Yeah, it was absolutely traumatic, because you are repeatedly told that the people out there in the world are evil. They're bad people. And then, you go out into the world. This is one of the things that happened to me was I joined the local YMCA, and I began to just interact with people outside of the group. And I thought, these are really nice people, and they're happy. Excuse me, my voice is getting froggy. And they have good marriages. How is that possible? You know, that people who don't read the Bible every day and follow this biblical prescription of submission could actually have healthy marriages, and they're in better shape than my marriage. You know, it was a big question mark in my head. And I knew from how people were treated as they left, you know, that I had been able to observe. I knew what was in store for me if I made that ultimate decision to leave. But not being one to tolerate injustice against myself or other people as I was observing it, something compelled me, you know, to do what is right. And so when I finally made a decision not to go, I knew I would face, you know, basically excommunication, to where, you know, these people they're not only not going to associate you, but your mud, your dirt. They're going to talk about you at every wedding. They're going to... Yeah, I mean, you're the topic of conversation at the next prayer meeting where they pretend to care about you. Let's pray for poor Tiffani.
Oh, yeah, let's pray for her. I hate when it's...
And the rumors that flew around were amazing. I started a blog called Advance with Courage, The Musings of an Ex-Fundamentalist. I think it's still up, but I think I wrote 3 articles and never wrote anything else, literally. But those 3 articles were circulated at the next wedding as evidence of what a heathen I was. And they were, if I looked at them now, I think I don't even believe half that stuff now. And but that to them was such a stray from, you know, the truth as they thought. But the rumor going around was, because I did end up divorced, and the rumor going around was that I had left my husband and children. I just, you know, packed my bags, walked out, and joined a Buddhist or a Hindu cult, or it was a Buddhist or Hindu, which was completely ridiculous. You know, I had shared parenting. You know, I still do with my ex-husband. We are very amicable and get along fantastic. And I never joined any, you know, cults. I had left one. So that's, you know, this is what they do to you. And then they, you know, you're the topic of sermons for weeks on end, just like I heard sermons about people that left, on how God, you know, we were warned, if you leave, God will destroy your life. And
oh my God.
You want to know what happened to the Smith family? The Smith family, and then they would tell you, you know, their oldest son got in a car accident and he's paralyzed from the waist down. And
yeah, shouldn't have left. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. I mean, exactly what they talk about in these signs of a cult. And you would hear these stories of, you know, how people's lives went to ruin. And I'm sure if they ever speak of me, and the pastor might in his new congregation somewhere, oh, they ended up divorced. You know, and you know what I mean? Never mind that I am now a successful life coach and, you know, and rapid transformational therapist, and I'm helping set people free. All of that, they're going to brush under the rug. And
well, yeah, because you're talking to us, the heathens, you know, the
yes. And she's now on Heathen Podcasts.
Oh my God. And it's got the word,
the teachings of Satan.
Yeah. And it's got the word shit in the title. So, I mean, you're really down for like,
yes, I use the word fuck on, now that makes 3 times. So
oh my God. I mean, you've got the Head Express waiting for you at the door. I mean, that's it. So can I ask what do you believe in now? Like faith-wise?
Yeah, I'm a very spiritual person. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't, you know, it's interesting because I traveled on a journey from cult to liberal Christianity to agnosticism to atheist to agnosticism back to what I would term spiritual. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I believe there's a being, an intelligent being who's very loving and guides and directs my life. I believe I can access wisdom. And I've seen it when working with people, you know, not knowing what to do, and then suddenly remembered, oh, I'm guided and directed, and I have wisdom available to me, and then that wisdom will come. And so I apologize for that outdoor noise.
Oh, don't worry.
Yeah, so then, you know, so this is where I've fallen into this place now, and I've been in the greatest place of peace that I've ever known in my life. And I think one of the biggest factors in that is that I don't have to know everything. I'm okay with uncertainty. I'm okay with not understanding everything. I don't need to have everything spelled out for me. because once you remove the concept of this punitive, angry deity that's up there ready to throw you in hell if you screw up, if you don't believe the right thing, when you remove that from your paradigm and view of the world, then, you're free to explore. And that's why I consider probably the most dangerous doctrine that I was taught when I was in Christendom was the doctrine of eternal damnation. I mean, what's worse than burning for all eternity?
Yeah, it doesn't sound
It doesn't end. Talk about hopelessness. And so it's the ultimate fear. And when you have that looming over your head, you can never be free.
Yeah. No, yeah, I do admire that they haven't like if you were meant to have a faith, I'm glad that they didn't take it away from you, that you still have a belief system. Now, not everybody is supposed to have a belief system. If people are atheists or whatnot, I don't care, but if that's for you, like the fact that you are, I guess that you call yourself like spiritual, they haven't killed it for you. And I think that, that's the important thing, is that wherever it is that if you were meant to believe in something and that's still belief, that's yours. I mean, I'm spiritual as well. And I think it's great that they haven't killed that for you, completely put you off. And that, you're just doing you and you're helping other people. So before I ask you the finishing thoughts, I just want to say it's been an immense pleasure having this conversation with you, Tiffani. I could talk to you for hours, literally.
Same here.
So, and also, like I gotta say, like you're pretty cool. Like you definitely got some humor in you, because I threw some stuff to your way that it's not for everybody. But you're very open-minded, you're extremely open-minded. I'm very, very impressed and humbled by you. So, wanted to ask you. So the asked 2 questions to all of my guests. So the first one is, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Oh, very interesting question. Well, I would just like to tell her to believe in her own inerrant goodness, that she is enough the way she is. She was born enough. She has always been enough, and she always will be enough. And that is the opposite of what religious cults will teach you.
Yeah, I love that. I think everyone can definitely hear that and tell that to themselves, like, just to say, like, I am enough. It sounds like nothing, but if you really dig down, a lot of us are having that, forgetting that.
And the woman who taught me rapid transformational therapy, who founded
Marissa P. I am enough. That's what. Yes.
That is her message to the world.
It is.
You are enough, because what she discovered was that was really at the bottom of most people's issues that they're struggling with, whether it's depression, anxiety, addiction, is this core insecurity that I am not where I'm supposed to be. I'm not enough. I don't deserve love. I mean, most of our toxic beliefs are some variation of I am not enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so the second question is, what stuff do you not put up with anymore?
What do I not put up with anymore? Disrespect. I mean, if I'm like my boyfriend now, he's very good to me, but if I think he's disrespecting me, usually it's my imagination, or I'm displeased with something, I'm not happy with something, I'll actually speak up. And that's something I never did when I was married. I will take the blame for that, not put it on my ex-husband. I didn't have the courage to speak up, and you were not encouraged to do so. It was considered a sinful behavior on the part of a woman to express, if, I need you to help me in a certain way. I need you to do something different. I might need you to change. It wasn't permitted and allowed. And so now if I'm, something's bothering me, my boyfriend knows that I'm going to express it. I'm going to say, when you said that, I kind of took it this way. It bothered me. And sometimes I'm not taking it correctly at all. That's fine. But you don't get anywhere in a relationship if you don't discuss what's bothering you. And so no more am I taking the doormat mouse approach. Not that anyone's treating me that way, but just in my own mind, I made a doormat of myself by not speaking up and saying, this bothers me. This is making me unhappy. Or, I'm wondering about this, because there's scary questions in relationships,
Yes.
And I ask the scary questions now. And not just in my romantic relationships, but in all of them. It's like, I'm not afraid to face reality, even if that reality is painful, and to, I'm not even outside of, the romantic relationship arena, if someone begins to walk all over me, I'm going to speak up.
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, yeah, and not being afraid to ask is something that I'm learning as well, just to speak up and just to actually ask the hard questions. And it's not easy when we're not used to it. So Tiffani, can you please tell us where can people find you, how they can work with you? Can they work with you online, long distance? Just give us everything. This has been so wonderful. And I'm actually really sad to end this conversation. I'm having such a good time with you.
I know. I was thinking, boy, I would love to do this again sometime.
You know what? I'm definitely up for that. If we let's find I think there's so much to be learned from you, and we're having such good conversations. For now, please tell us, where can people find you?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Tiffani Cappello. Tiffani is spelled Tiffani, Cappello, CA, 2 P's, E, 2 L, and O. And my website is really easy. It's tiffanicappello.com. And my new website coming up soon is going to be transformedwomenacademy.com as well, which is a new online programs I'm running for women to help them become empowered. So that's a best place to locate me. I also have a support group online for women called Transformed Women on Facebook. And then, of course, there is my support group for people who are in cults and want to explore how they can get out, or people that have left. And that group is called Former Fundamentalists. It's a very wonderful group, and it's filled with atheists and agnostics and Christians and spiritual people. And we don't always get along, but as the admin of that group, I require it, so people are removed. So it maintains a beautiful, respectful culture of learning and encouragement for that reason.
Well, send me all those links and I'll put them all in the show notes so people can copy and paste or click on it depending which platform they listen from. But I'll put all of these links in there. This has been so wonderful, Tiffani. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, honestly. I'm so glad we were able to do this.
No, thank you. And I'm sure I'll speak to you soon. We'll find a way to have you to come back.
Perfect.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com, or come and find me on Instagram. I have 2 accounts. One is at Tool for This Shit Podcast and at Health Expert Angie, link in the show notes. See you next week, and until then,
using health inappropriately.